Welcome, Jen, to the show. Really glad to have you on the podcast. Now, you are doing some different things with entrepreneurs, with leaders, and you've got like a 4-step process. I shouldn't even go into it. So will you let people know about your background and what you're doing today, and let's dive into the conversation.
Sure, absolutely. It's great to be on. And my background. So let me try to give you the quick and dirty. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I grew up in a house of educators who also had side jobs. So that's, I believe, where the entrepreneurial blood came from that moment. And just going through college and post-college, I realized I needed to be strong in business and finance. So I got educated in that way. I worked in the finance field, and then working not only with my business owner clients that I worked with, but also the business that I was in. I just fell in love with running a growing business. So in my early 30s, I proverbially hung the shingle out, emailed my closest 1,500 friends in my contact list, and started consulting. But I had had many years, pretty much had worked in small and medium-sized businesses since I was 16. So I had a lot of experience under the belt. And I guess you could say the rest is history 16 years later.
Wow, well, that's great. And you have some interesting books in the background, but most interesting of all, most of our people are going to listen, not watch the video. But if they do, they're going to wonder, okay, why does she have green eggs and ham in the background? There's got to be a story behind that.
Yeah. The story is that, first of all, I happen to love Dr. Seuss, and I find no matter what age I'm at, the messaging is definitely meant for adults almost more than kids. And Green Eggs has stuck out in the grouping of books because it's about trying new things. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's what we have to do. We have to try, see if it sticks, call it a day if it doesn't, and then keep pivoting and trying new things every day. So that's the Green Eggs and Ham story.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I did realize, and I haven't gone back and really spent a lot of time on it, that Seuss was actually, really smart. It wasn't a lot of childish stuff. I mean, there was some really profound things that he put forth in the books.
Yeah. I wonder if, I'm sure people have interviewed him in the past and I haven't heard it, but I bet he wrote for the adults that were reading the books to the kids to subliminally give them the same message as they're reading to their kids at night. At least that's what I took away from it. But the whole effort to get us adults a little bit more in the right mindset.
Sounds like some youth pastors I've known where they've said, hey, if you want to build a church, you go after the kids and get them in fun programs, and they'll force their parents to come to church.
That's right. That's right. Thank God for the next generation. That's all I have to say.
Oh, yeah. Next generation. Oh, yeah. We better not. We could talk that. That's easy to talk about that. And
lots that are easy.
I was talking to somebody earlier today, and we mentioned 2020, and I said, oh, yeah, we're so glad that's gone. And he said, oh, no, we're going to, in 2021, we may say we wish it was 2020.
That's right.
There's so many uncertainties in 2021. It could get worse than 2020, which most all of us are like, oh, yeah, I want to see that year go.
How could it possibly? Well, it's like the ground is constantly shifting underneath you. So an entrepreneur, it's funny, an entrepreneur is okay with that because an entrepreneur is always continuously improving and growing, or gosh, for that matter, starting more than one business. But for most people that aren't entrepreneurial, that is earth-shattering. It's like, when is the ground going to stop moving? When will things be stable? And I can just know that tomorrow looks similar to today. So yeah, it's really, we're in for another fun ride.
Fun ride. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And are you finding that who do you work with typically? Is it entrepreneurs, or are you working with leaders in larger organizations? What's the typical profile?
Yeah, the typical profile is businesses that have recurring revenues under 10 million. So I would say entrepreneurs, maybe it's second generation owners. I've done that as well. And I can't say they're as much of an entrepreneur usually as the first gen, but you never know. So, and they're all in service business. So some of the concepts that I cover could be used for a product business, but not all of them. A lot of them are geared more toward like that long-term relationship with your customer type of business.
And what are these clients doing now as, we have these huge issues that are coming up, whether it's COVID or it's politics, or of course, politics is such a small word with all these broad meanings, depending on which bucket you want to go into. Yeah. But So many unknowns and problems. Are you seeing your people are struggling with them, or they're like, hey, great, a problem. That means there's another opportunity for me. I get to dive in. What are you finding they're doing?
Yeah, no, it's a problem that, they're tackling it, but it's a problem because there's this juggling constantly. There's this tug and pull between the health of your business, the health of yourself, the health of your employees, the health of your family. I mean, and when I say health, there's the physical, but there's the mental health, right? So in a business, it's the culture. At home, it's just, the environment. There's a lot of struggle. So there's a lot more tug and pull. There's a lot more, I guess we use the word multitasking. In a given day, what does your day look like? It's a little less stable. And, they struggle with it. So time management and focus is so much more important. I think that those that are coming out ahead are those that can really compartmentalize and can focus and understand what's in their control versus what's not in their control.
Yeah, it seems like it's harder to compartmentalize right now, particularly those that have kids that are supposed to be going off to school, but they're not. They're home either part of the day or all of the day doing remote schooling. So how are your people dealing with that?
They're trying to carve out places where they can work. And if they're lucky enough to have a good supportive partner or spouse, they kind of split up their day on, who is doing what or supporting. And, listen, if you have older kids, it's emotional. If you have younger kids, it's emotional and educational. I mean, it's all across the gambit. On a funny note, I will say that I've adopted myself a set of LED lights around my office windows. So when they're red, do not come in. When they're green, it's good to go. And I think a lot of people, when they heard that idea last year, adopted it. So, there's these little tricks, right? Or like having lunch with your family so that's the time when they know that it's time to meet with you and bring up issues, but not sporadically throughout the day, which is kind of, actually, if I could relate that to business, I've always told business owners and leaders, listen, you have to compartmentalize your day of when you should be interrupted. This idea of interrupting people all day long sporadically is not healthy for your team and it's not healthy for you. So it's almost that same methodology, that you use for business, you would use in that home office.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It reminds me, the red lights remind me of the on-air type of thing in a production studio. And I love the lunch aspect as far as, meeting together and kids like routine. And so that would be really helpful for people. And I've heard of couples that are tag teaming.
Yeah.
Let me go work for 2 hours, you cover, or, whatever it might be.
Us adults actually like it too. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I have been known to eat at my desk, and that is not healthy. But I kept saying it was, right? There is something to be said for a little bit of predictability and stepping away from the office. So. Oh yeah,
big time, big time. So talk to us about what is your unique recipe for leadership, and how do people come to you? They've got problems, and how does your system address that really effectively?
So I'm glad you said unique, because I'm more modest than that. And I think the techniques that I use with the businesses are not rocket science, but maybe it's just, that's better. They're easy to understand. One of the big things that I do, and I do this for myself as much as I do it for the businesses, is we create what's called a simmer pot. And it's visualizing your business planning and your improvements and your strategy in a way that you can collaborate with others. So I think it was the old style that you used to write up a business plan, and it kind of used to sit on a shelf and you would touch it from time to time. And then it evolved to a Word document, and then it evolved to Excel. Now I do believe in using collaboration software, which is super cheap, and actually dumping every great idea you have, every crazy idea you have, right, into this kind of simmer pot, and then starting to organize it. And the secret sauce is not dumping it into the simmer pot, but actually then going through and for each idea you have, defining the benefit of implementing. So we have so many great ideas. And you're right, for people that can't see, me visually right now, I do have one of the books that I show is Essentialism, because I had to practice this idea of saying no. So the way I do it is you write out the idea and then you write out the benefit of implementing the idea. If you can't write the benefit, it's not worth thinking about right now. So it just gets tucked away. So it's an indirect way of saying no, because entrepreneurs unto themselves really don't sleep too much. We're constantly thinking of great ideas. We're constantly thinking of improvements, right? It's like, it's just in our blood. How do you control that crazy? So you stick it in the simmer pot, you define the benefit, and if there's no benefit, you tuck it away.
Yeah. And when you define the benefit, do you encourage them to put some metrics on that? So, you have two good ideas, so you can more easily kind of compare and decide which one really deserves my time?
Yeah. Sometimes I do encourage that. Sometimes I just have them, because maybe they can't articulate it. So sometimes I have them go to the next step of saying, okay, this idea, I've written a general benefit, right? It increases revenue. It helps culture. It's good for the bottom line, whatever it is. Then I say to them, okay, so that's great. Who's going to implement it and when? And then they get stuck again, and that's okay. So instead of putting a KPI to it, right, a key performance, instead of doing that, they can go to the next step of thinking who's going to do it and when. And then that also helps prioritize, because then you start to think about, well, is this truly possible to do along with everything else I'm doing? So by the time you get this kind of like master plan of ideas, which by the way can morph every day because you have new ideas, it starts to flow and be organized in the way that it's actually, it's not the right word, implementable. It can be implemented and it's doable to have an impact.
Interesting. And so the collaboration software you're using, is that, Google, or is that Microsoft Teams or OneNote or what?
Yeah. So for those that use Microsoft 365, I suggest they use the Microsoft Task Planner. For those that are in Google, I recommend that they use Asana or like a ClickUp, or softwares out there, because Google doesn't have their own yet. I'm sure they will. Just a matter of time. But yeah, for 365ers, they already have it at their fingertips.
Okay. Well, that's great. And as I recall from reading your stuff, you've got like 4 steps that you work with people on, don't you?
Yeah, actually, yes, 4. And then the last is the S. So I'll explain that. And, you can always go to my website to recap on this, because it's long. So I call it Idios, which is IDEOS. I think this is what you're referring to. And I did not misspell it. It's not meant to be ideas. It's meant to be Idios. And what it is when you go through each part of your business and you think about what you're doing. So let's take, for example, how to approach a customer or onboard a customer. You think about ways to integrate the work. So that means using maybe your technology to move data from one place to another to reduce the work. You look for ways to delegate the work, that's the D, so that it's not falling in you, the entrepreneur, but other parties, maybe a provider, an outsourced provider, a staff person. You find ways to eliminate, that's the E, so that's 2 ways. Either you're automating something, so it's done automatically, or you're literally eliminating in like essentialism. You're saying you don't need to do this. If work is still left at the point of E at this point, then O is for outsourcing. So you find an outside provider that will do the work. And then when you get to the end, S is for staff recalibration. So as you go through this process in each area of your business and work to basically lower, delegate the workload, or eliminate, there's still work left to be done, but you do it in a different way. So now the staff roles and responsibilities have to be shifted around. And then you go back around to the cycle again. So this Idios mantra is something that I devised probably in my late 20s, now that I think about it. And we've used it for years. And it's actually what helps entrepreneurs keep their businesses in continuous improvement mode and keep coming back to how they operate and cut down on the work.
So if I'm understanding correctly, then the integration piece on the front end, this works for both new ideas. It also works for looking at existing processes that you want to improve?
Yep, exactly.
So if I've got an existing process, then I'm looking at, okay, how is this integrated with the rest of the business How well does it support it, build the rest of the business, or is this just not consistent with what we're doing, or it's not adding enough profit or whatever, right? So I'm kind of looking at a kind of all the way it integrates in with the business and affects us and affects people's time. Is that right?
That's correct. You can also take it and go really deep if you want. So if you want to go deep into your operations, you can look at integrate also as what way is data that I have, okay, moving to other systems to do the work for me. Let me give you an example. Most people have a website and most people have a marketing funnel. So, maybe somebody Googles the business, they find the website, and then the website is like a fly trap. It tries to capture them in, right? And maybe the call to action is, I don't know, call me or put an order in, something on the website, right? So you're collecting data from that potential customer. Integrating could be as deep as that data you're collecting on that customer is then sent to another system to shoot an email out to that customer. Maybe it's to connect with that customer. So integrate can be about the whole business, but it also can be very deep into that process. And how do I get data to move from one system to another so I don't have to pay humans to do the work? They can focus on being strategic.
It's very interesting to me that the rest of the model then really deals on who's responsible for making a particular idea successful. And also the real trigger or indicator is the first one there, the D is delegate. So immediately the entrepreneur has to be thinking of, how do I implement this idea, but I'm not doing all the work? Am I reading you right?
That's right. And let's talk like the solo entrepreneur, maybe in business 2, 3, 4 first, right? Even I was a solo. Everything I did, I always dreamed of, I'm going to build this or document it in a way that the minute I can afford it, I can hand this off to somebody else, and I don't have to train them by sitting next to them every day, all day, and telling them what I did. So I thought this whole idea, this whole mantra was built around delegation, right? And then I thought, okay, what I've seen businesses do wrong is they spend a lot of money on people because they don't look to continuously improve. There's nothing wrong with spending money on people, but then the owners start to get upset with, I have to manage like all these people. And I don't feel that we're being proactive and productive here. And it's because they didn't look into the business and look for ways to, again, eliminate the work, delegate the work, outsource it. So I knew that was going to come as I grew a business for somebody else or even my own. And so that's where, again, when you think about delegating, what do you do as a solo? You write it out. You write it out before you even have a human to give it to.
Interesting. And what about the person who thinks, well, I just do it better than anybody else?
You mean most of us?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in that camp. That's fine. At what cost is what I say now. At what cost? So if I do this work, what won't get done? Because there is a finite number of hours in the day, and there is a finite amount of energy that I have to give where my head is clear and productive.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then where does the model struggle? Have you ever run into where you needed to extend something, do something slightly differently?
Yeah. Well, the model struggles, some might call it's a technical term, dangerous middle, but the model struggles when you as the entrepreneur, the owner, find yourself struggling between managing the business and managing the customer base or just being a visionary incentive. At some point, you're going to have the business hopefully grow big enough where maybe your love, your passion, where you want to be working is not on the day-to-day of the business. And that's when, like you mentioned about, I could do it better than anyone else. Well, that's fine, but what you're doing is not what you love to do. Or maybe that's not your highest calling to move the business to the next level. And that's where the business absolutely grinds. It stagnates, it flatlines for a while, and it's called the dangerous middle. And you have to decide at that point, am I going to grow up myself, even as an owner, am I going to grow up and be the managing C-level person of this business? Or am I going to let somebody else do the day-to-day management so I can be the visionary, the salesperson. That's where they get stuck.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So, can you give me an example of someone who's come to you with a problem and then you've applied this model and what happened?
Sure. It's a question of which example.
Yeah, choose whichever one you want.
Yeah.
And then I have another question after that.
Yeah, no. So, I would say, okay, here's an example. So the business, let me lay out is about 11 people, 11 employees. And I can't even tell you how many outside providers, probably about 5 to 10. And they have stagnated in growth for about 3 years as a service business. And they were still leaning on their old way of operating. And the staff were a little disillusioned. They weren't motivated as much, certainly not as productive. They weren't energized. It was kind of like, if I bring up a good idea, it's probably going to get shot down. Old ways ride hard on this. So this firm, when working with them and giving them this different way of thinking, so it found no blame with anyone, and going through each of their major processes and just doing these small Kenzens, these small changes, to shifting the workload or giving them some time back by automating or whatnot. They actually, with no extra marketing whatsoever, got to see a 20% growth in their business. And why did that happen? And this is really important. We work internally on our business, but we don't realize that when we're happier and we have clarity and we see progress, that does permeate into the community. So even in an environment where we're working remotely, that, again, finding clarity, feeling like you make progress, that does permeate, and it actually does attract more business. So it was pretty shocking when we got done with this, and it took about, I would say, 7 months. So it took some time because it's about changing your mindset. They had actually brought in more business in that year than they had brought in the last 3 years, and without even doing extra marketing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how does your system identify or address, employees who are stuck? They're not in the right role. They're not performing at a high level, whatever, those are kind of two of the most common things that come up for many people. But how does it deal with that?
Yeah. So my system doesn't, but I have this other little technique. It's like a 1-page job description, but I call it a very awfully long name. I call it the life career mission statement. And it's a mix of a job description and a personal statement. And one of the big keys in this document is they have to fill it out themselves, the first round, each employee, and they have to identify all the roles that they fill. So usually when people think of themselves in their companies, they think of the title they're given. But when you ask them, what hats do you wear? What roles do you play? Is it trainer? Is it business development? Is it the techie? Like, what is it? They start to realize that they're wearing 5 to 10 hats. And then the other part of this document is we not only ask about their career goals, like their career path and where they want to go, but we ask them about their personal goals. The reason I do that is more now than ever, and this pains me to say this, you have so many employees that are coming in with an exorbitant amount of debt. And one of their big goals might be to own their own condo. One of their goals might be to travel for the first time. And we just take this for granted sometimes as entrepreneurs that have been around. And that's actually holding them back at work. They don't tie what they do at work into how to reach their personal goals. So sometimes that's the hurdle with people. Sometimes that's the hurdle when you work through this Idios mantra, they get shaky. Like, well, if you're automating and delegating differently, where do I land up? Like, what's my purpose here? So that 1-pager, along with this, is how we tie everything together to their personal and their work life and the improvements at the business. And that's when the light bulb goes on. Like, that's, if anybody asks me where the fun is, it's when they realize how it's all tied together and it's how it will help them rise up.
It reminds me of a book called, I believe it's The Dream Manager. And
I've never read it.
Interesting little book. And the guy's premise is that you structure, and he tells it like a fable, like Pat Lencioni does. And he says that basically it was a janitorial company, high turnover, low engagement. And they basically created a program where their employees could opt in, no cost, to meet with a financial advisor. I think it was monthly, and basically define personal goals. And for some of them, it was, getting rid of debt. It might be school debt or some other debt, or buying a home or traveling to Europe or whatever it might be. And it was all confidential. And this financial advisor wasn't just, go throw your money in mutual funds.
Right.
This person actually knew a lot more. And this person would help them develop, step-by-step plan, personal budget, blah, 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 and really work with them and give them some guidance and accountability to pursue these goals. And the argument was, and I haven't had any of my clients fully adopt this, but they've done it in pieces and it's been very successful. The argument was that when you do that, then it gives the person more meaning in the work they're doing for your company, because they say, hey, my company really cares about me, so I care about them, type of thing. And so they come in, they work harder, they're more loyal. And you just accept the fact, hey, I may help this person, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, go start their own business, go do whatever. But you're just like, hey, that's what I want to do. Relationships are number one for me, and I'm going to invest in my people in a very tangible way. So I think it's very consistent with what you're saying. It takes it a step further, but I'm hearing that. I think one of the big, we hear this big insult against Gen Y, Gen Z about, they just want to sit around and their entitlement and whatever. I don't know. My experience has been, if you can connect them to meaningful work, they're dying for meaning. They're dying for truth. They're smart enough to realize they're being lied to in the media and by so many people. And they just like to be able to trust in something. And if you can do that, they're often your best employees, or at least equal to, in regards to motivation and commitment. They get out of bed in the morning, they want to come to work. What's been your experience?
I am right there with you. And I had, at the time, several years ago, I had a much larger team. And if they'll call you out on the rug when you don't have your purpose figured out. And that's the difference. Like, they're really looking in the mirror, right? As a manager and an owner. And I do think that they're rock stars. I got to tell you, when I work with these businesses and they have young people, the minute you give them some clarity and a little bit of coaching, it's like, you just can't stop them, which is great. I always say to them, to the owners, I said, listen, your biggest problem is harnessing that energy. That's a great problem to have. Like, that's a great problem. So I'm totally with you on that. And it's not just because I have teenagers, although they do call me out on things as well, to be perfectly frank. But yeah, the millennials are great. They're really great.
Yeah, it really comes back to a management issue. So that's what I always say is I do a lot with hiring. And I say, when people call me and they say, I got a problem with an employee, I say, well, at some point in the conversation, I kind of share with them that, well, it's not really a problem with the employee, it's a problem with you, because you hired them, you managed them, you developed them, and you retained them. So something is wrong on your end if they're still there and not performing up to your stuff. So as we're kind of transitioning to the end here, but I'm really curious. You're working with a lot of companies. They're great people. You're doing some great work. What are you finding is the best thing they're doing during these COVID times, these remote work times, that's been a change for them, a pivot, but it's really working and helping them be their best?
Yeah. I have to say, they are being more understanding of each of their people's situation. I think it's an eye-opener, right? I mean, for the businesses that I work with that are virtual, like they're all working remotely, let me tell you what an eye-opener it is just to see their employees' background, where they're sitting. Yeah, but I do. And I also see businesses, we're already starting to talk about what does it look, when they get back into the office, and what does that look like? And they are putting together so much more flexible setups for them, where they can work remotely from home. They've learned and they've pushed themselves to learn how to collaborate online. Maybe it's through like what we're on with the Zoom, but also collaborating, communicating through systems and planning systems. And yeah, they're just being, I just think they're understanding and protecting the employee's time more. And I'm optimistic that that will last for a very long time. Like, it's not something where it's a blip. They're literally making it part of their mantra of how they're going to work forevermore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. So as we close out, 2 questions for you. One is, what's a piece of advice that's like the major piece of advice that you would give entrepreneurs today?
Get that crazy out of your head, because you're probably making everyone around you crazy. Definitely document everything that you're thinking about. I don't care if it's paper and then you work to 365 or Asana. I don't care. But get the crazy out of your head. Get it a little bit more organized and be honest about how much time you can spend on things. That would be 1. And 2, protect your time. I do worry with entrepreneurs, especially of the burnout. And I just think it's really important to value and protect your time. That's all I have to offer.
Yeah, so that's great. So get the ideas out there, get some collaboration on there, I would assume. And then, protect the time is a huge biggie. So if people want to learn more about what you're doing, Jen, where do they go?
Just jennifergoldmanconsulting.com. Couldn't make it easier. It's all there. Or you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, but it's easier to go there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Nice and easy. Have a great night.
Thank you.